This is the Final Word Cricket podcast coming to you live from the rooftops of Rawalpindi. You can see the sun setting, the ground behind us. It's filmed in front of a live studio audience today.
Hey!
Yes, we have a range of people on the roof watching us do this, which is mildly embarrassing, but I suppose no more embarrassing than it going out on the internet afterwards. Adam Collins is with me. A day that you could describe in about 4 seconds if you had to, but I'll give you up to 30 in which to do it.
Okay, Australia started at 7 for 449. They were all out in about quarter of an hour. They had a 17-run first innings deficit. Not that it mattered though, they didn't take a wicket. Pakistan made their way to none for 252 by the time they shook hands deep into the final session. Abdullah Shafique 136 not out, his maiden test ton. Imam-ul-Haq 111 not out, completing twin tons. The first 2 centuries of his career, and thus a bit of history on the way through. But yes, a stalemate at Rawalpindi.
Yes, they're not the first person to make twin centuries as his first 2, because a couple of players have done it on debut. Of course, Lawrence Rowe was one.
Oh, did he? I thought it only happened once before with Philip Hughes.
No,
okay,
that was his second test, Philip Hughes.
I mean,
but yeah, as in the first
second,
2 in his career. No, Lawrence Rowe 2 on debut, and Yasir Hamid, who made 2 against Bangladesh for Pakistan in 2003, I reckon it was. As far as stats go, it was 728 for 4 Pakistan across the test match.
Yeah, 239 overs Australia bowled to take 4 wickets. I mean, that is an absolute punish. Probably the one bit of good news, and Pat Cummins spoke to this after play at the presentation, is that they don't have miles on the clock with the fast bowlers, because all of their work was on day 1 and day 2, and they bowled about a dozen overs between the 3 of them today. Nathan Lyon, on the other hand, he had to put in another shift. I think he sent down 26 overs, something like that, in addition to 50 odd in the first. So
a lot of Marnus, a lot of Travis Head. Australia were trying to alleviate that cost.
Yeah, that's right. It even concluded with Usman Khawaja bowling. I suspect, though, that will be in the Hall of Fame. But yeah, it was one of those days when we were all kind of pondering when they can call it off. What's the first available time to call it off? We don't like it to be that way. That's not how I'm hardwired, but such is cricket sometimes, and you just have to accept that, as Rob Key said on our broadcast, there's a degree of delayed gratification, and hopefully the buzz of Test cricket will return for all of us at Karachi next week.
I quite liked, in a way, the ruthlessness from Pakistan. There was no hint of let's have a declaration, let's have a dart, whatever. They knew they wouldn't get anywhere. They knew that making their bowlers warm up and prepare again wouldn't be good for them, and they thought, why not just wear out the Australians as much as possible? Let's just run down the clock. And the 2 openers, I mean, they were so disciplined. They gave very little away. They weren't completely dead batting. They did attack a little bit, but they were very judicious with their attacking shots. Even when they got to their hundreds, they didn't sort of have a happy frolic, which they could have done at that point. They were both determined to be there at the end, it seemed, and they did that. So the strike rates in the 40s or 50s, sort of ground their way through the day, and there was something kind of gratifying about how dull that was in a way.
Yeah, I agree. And look, Shafique is aesthetically a most pleasing player. Before the test, he's an easy one to look at on paper and go, hang on, he's played 5 first-class games, you know. Yeah, he made runs against Bangladesh, but will that count against Cummins and Hazelwood and Stark? No. He's one of those guys Pakistan have picked on spec, and they have been spot on. You see that from time to time. It's an impossible story in an Australian context. It couldn't happen. You couldn't play one domestic game and be picked for Australia A and play for Australia a couple of weeks later. Nathan Lyon's the closest you could get to it, and that's a once-in-a-lifetime tale, really, in modern cricket terms. So the fact that Abdullah Shafique looks so ridiculously good through mid-wicket and mid-on, and he looks to hit the ball hard, and we saw on day 1 that he's excellent behind point as well, either side of point. He looks a pretty good player, and now he's in the series. 44 in the first dig, an unbeaten ton in the second. He'll be a problem for Australia at Karachi and Lahore, I'm certain.
Statistical point of great interest to me. I was looking at test matches where an opening pair made a century stand in both innings. Before today, that had only happened 11 times. This was the 12th such occurrence. Abdullah Shafique has played in 2 of those 12 test matches, and he's playing his 3rd match today. So in 2 of his 3 games, he's been involved in twin century opening stands. He was batting with Abid Ali against Bangladesh when he debuted and made 2 50s, and then he did it again here today. Now, very placid deck and all the rest of it. But 145 years of Test cricket, 11 occasions, and then this guy does it twice in 3 Test matches.
Wow, that's the stuff I love, as you know.
Yeah.
And also the fact that it's only the second time in Test history where there have been 3 100-run stands in a Test match, which seemed odd to me. That's for the first wicket, I should say.
Yeah.
But Andrew Sampson dug out that gem. So,
Well,
even though
there's a technicality on Sampson's one though, which he found.
That's for the third. That's for the third, I think.
Yeah,
There's 2 that don't count with the technicality, but run through it anyway.
Yeah. So 300 run partnerships for the first wicket. That's happened a couple of times before. It's never happened 3 innings in a row, like 1, 2, 3. But the one that he dug out was where there were 3 partnerships that were all for the first wicket, because there was a 100 partnership, then an injury, then another 100 partnership, then an injury, then a third 100 partnership. But those are not opening partnerships. That's a partnership for the first wicket. But it's not. You can't come in after an injury and say that you're part of the opening partnership.
No, I agree.
Didn't open.
I agree entirely. This is the second, not the third, on that basis. And look, that brings us to the elephant in the room, I suppose, and that's the surface. 14 wickets in 15 sessions is no good. The competitive balance between bat and ball that we touched on last night absolutely wasn't there today. The pitch actually got worse through the Test match, not better. And by better, I mean more in it for the bowlers. You can kind of accept a road on day one. That happens, but there's a tacit understanding that there'll be something going the other way. We've had many pitch conversations on the final word through the time we've made this podcast.
They're the least interesting conversations as well. They're the ones we don't want to be having.
Well, that's right. For Test matches that have ended in 2 days, and now for one that could have gone for 22 days. And as we discussed last year when going through the Chennai pitch, this is just as bad. So I hope the ICC, as much as it pains me to say, because Rawalpindi have been tremendous hosts and I love this ground and I can't wait to return, but that's no good, and hopefully they'll get their act together here, and please let it not be the same at Karachi next week.
Yeah, absolutely, because there's no point doing that. There's nothing in that for Pakistan, for their bowlers, and I couldn't help, like I said yesterday, looking at that green wicket 2 strips over and thinking, if you'd unleashed Shaheen and Nasim on that wicket, they could have done something magical. We could have seen something special. I'd rather see a Test over in 2 days than dead in 5. I'd rather see a shootout than something like this.
Yeah, it's a story of what could have been. And I don't think that pitch would have been over in 2 days, by the way. I mean, it's not completely prepared, of course, but on the basis of what we've seen here before, it doesn't preclude a team from making big runs. It just provides a bit for the seamers. And there was nothing there today. Even in Australia's second innings with the ball, Nathan Lyon was on after 5 overs. And that tells the full story, really. So over
and
to the
bowling
ICC.
Outside leg stump, trying to sort of copy the Norman Ali tactics, because there was nothing else for him to do, really.
Yeah, no choice for it. I felt sorry for Lyon, just on Australia's bowlers. I did feel for him on the basis that there were a couple of half opportunities that didn't quite come to fruition for him. There was one that went through the slips cordon. You could see the palpable frustration when his arms were up in the air. Speaking of arms up in the air, I loved the century celebration from Imam the second time around. I have no idea why he was making a third umpire TV sign, but so he was. Before, as we've seen from a few Pakistan players during the week, kneeling, kissing the turf, as he did after his 157 in the first dig and looking up to praise. So you don't see that with other teams too often, so it's a nice thing to be part of here in Pakistan.
Yeah, and particularly, when the call to prayer echoes across the ground and all the rest of it. I read it more as a circular thing, because Babar Azam did it back to him from the stands, and maybe it was an Elton John Circle of Life reference, maybe it was a Lion King, I don't know, everything the sunlight touches, one day all of this will be yours, except for that area over there. Look, who knows? We can probably find out. Maybe he was doing his spectacles. But even for how dull it was at the end, I still enjoyed it. I still really I sat outside for that whole last session and just sort of soaked up the noise from the crowd. The crowd was still going bananas.
Especially before lunch with the vuvuzelas down here with the students. That was as loud as it's been. Maybe a third or a half full today, the lowest attendance by some margin. But because those students were in, they were going wild, and good on them for it, that they came here with all that enthusiasm. And again, it's a reminder that for the longest time they couldn't attend Test cricket, and now they'll get sucked into the game in their own way, and they'll be part of the next generation of Pakistan cricket, and that's just wonderful.
And there were crowds of grown men, sort of Pindi boys, I guess, down here with their trumpet, and they were all moshing up and down, and it was like you've got 2 blokes out in the middle on hundreds, you're none for 250. I guess that's good, but their level of excitement, I couldn't really understand how they were generating it, but I was impressed by it. I still enjoyed, the vibe.
I like your use of Pindi boys there. We learned a bit of that at dinner last night. That's maybe a conversation for another time. But yes, there were plenty of them in today, and the hosts here were just amazing, even down to the jacket I'm wearing right now, which the official scorer gifted me. It's if you're not watching on YouTube, it's the domestic cricket Pakistan jacket. It's a little sort of 80s style zip-up jobby. It's sensational. I'll be wearing
the little
it everywhere.
flying stripes down the bottom, sort of on the cuffs, the elasticated waist. You know the style.
Absolutely. So yeah, that again, it's every day of this Test match. We've been overwhelmed by the generosity of the people here. So in a way, I leave with a heavy heart. I wish we could stay for a bit longer, but off to Karachi we go. En route to that, we've got a Hall of Fame to deal with first. Geoff, there are a couple of obvious nominations. I'll take Forward Alarm, please.
Okay.
Thanks for coming. Didn't get a hit on the best track ever in terms of making bulk runs. In either innings was he called upon. Of course, they elevated Muhammad Rizwan and Iftikhar Ahmed ahead of him in the first dig. Of course, he didn't get a bowl, although he is a part-time spinner. He might have got a bowl, and he dropped a catch in the gully. That's it. Can we have your match fees and make sure you bring your afternoon tea?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. The Jody Hicks of Pakistan.
Yes.
Fawad Alam, thanks for coming. See you later. Thelma McKenzie, if you will. If you've been listening to the deep cuts of the show, you'll get that reference. Usman Khawaja getting a bowl at the end. That was, look, I mean, it wasn't, it didn't take a genius to figure out that would be a good idea, but it was still a good alert move from Pat Cummins to say, well, we know we're shaking hands in a minute. Give Usman a bowl in front of his sort of notional home crowd, his other home crowd, his second home crowd, and they were happy to see him. As far as wickets go,
they were chanting his name. It was brilliant. I loved it at the end. I mean, imagine he took a wicket there. We didn't get to have that moment where how would have the crowd responded to him posting three figures. I suspect it would have been raucous applause and all the rest of it. But yeah, they loved it when he got a bowl, and I loved that Usman was warming up for about 10 minutes before, just signalling to Cummins, I'm ready to serve if selected.
So as far as bowling goes, he took 2 wickets for Australia's under-19s against India, which must have been, about 15 years ago.
And the rest?
And he took 1 wicket in first-class cricket against South Australia in 2010-11. That's it. That's the only wicket he's ever taken in top flight cricket in any format. And he's played a fair bit of T20s and hasn't been called upon there. So
the only bowler who wasn't called upon was David Warner. The last time Australia used 9 bowlers, this is from Daniel Cherney from Code, it was the 2001 Dravid-Lakshman partnership. And the one fielder not to bowl in that innings was Justin Langer. Steve Waugh bowled some overs there. So Justin Langer was the only person who didn't get the ball.
I'm sure it's the other way around. I know I thought Hayden and Langer both bowled, and Steve Waugh had his dodgy back. But it could
I've been misled. Yeah. Either way, it's been 2 decades since they've had that kind of situation. So hopefully not again anytime soon, but it was a pleasure to see Usman Khawaja's off breaks for a couple of minutes before they knocked the bails off.
Remember in 2002 EA Sports Cricket how the bowling mechanism worked with a circle that would then shrink to where the ball would land, and the smaller the circle, the more accurate the bowler, because it would give you a smaller degree of possible variation. And you could pick Matthew Hayden or Justin Langer to bowl in that, and their circles were bigger than the pitch. They extended beyond both sides of the pitch, and Matthew Hayden bowled some real loose leg breaks in 2002 EA Sports Cricket, and it was pretty similar when he actually was called upon to bowl in Kolkata, I think.
Good to know. Nice plug for EA Sports. Hey, Geoff, let's wrap this up. We've got loads of final word coming between now and Karachi. We have a weekly show, which of course will be a tribute to Shane Warne that we promised after Stumps on day 2 here. We'll have story time coming out on the weekend before the Test match, and then we'll be back into our work at Karachi. Cannot wait to be at a ground with seats that are coloured from bay to bay like VFL Park when I was growing up. It's going to be an absolute treat. 34,000 capacity. I suspect they'll sell it out. A pitch which should spin. It's going to have a real energy to it, especially now we go.
Where is the blue football from on top of the scoreboard at Gaddafi Stadium? Nobody knows.
Well, that's going to be the week after at Gaddafi Stadium, but look, we'll find it there as well. Who's to know? This has been the final word. Pakistan Daily. Adam Collins and Geoff Lemon, thank you for all of your comments and sharing of the podcast and all the rest of it. We very much appreciate that. If you're not watching on YouTube, we're doing this in cinematic mode today, and we're on the roof of the stadium. A gorgeous backdrop with the sun setting to my left, and of course this beautiful jacket that I'm wearing. So seek it out. And yes, can't wait to do it all again on Saturday. Until then, good night from Rawalpindi with a couple of Pindi boys. Adam Collins and Geoff Lemon.
Hasta la vista, baby.